The chamber was old. Older than memory. Older than the stars that burned outside its crystal walls. Keeper Sylveth moved slowly through the darkness, her ancient body supported by the mechanical frame that had kept her alive for nearly 3,000 cycles. Her bioluminescent tendrils, once bright blue, now flickered with the pale light of dying embers. She was the last of the original archivists. The last one who remembered why the warnings existed. Today was the centennial warning. A ritual that had been performed for 400 centuries. A ritual that fewer and fewer of the young ones bothered to attend. The obsidian halls stretched before her, vast and silent. The walls were made of black crystal that absorbed light rather than reflected it. In ancient times, the Vaethari believed that darkness was sacred, that truth lived in shadow, that the most important knowledge should be kept away from the burning pride of those who thought they knew everything. Sylveth understood this wisdom now more than ever. She reached the central chamber and found her audience waiting. The Council of Ascension sat in their floating chairs, arranged in a perfect circle around the projection platform. There were 37 of them, leaders of the Vaethari hegemony, rulers of 17 star systems, masters of 40 billion souls, and not one of them wanted to be here. High Archon Kethrul sat at the center, his golden armor gleaming even in the dim light. He was young by Vaethari standards, barely 500 cycles old. His 4 eyes were sharp and impatient. His clawed hands drummed against his armrest in a steady rhythm of annoyance. "Keeper," he said, his voice like grinding stone. "We have wars to plan, colonies to manage, trade routes to secure. Can we move this along?" Sylveth did not respond immediately. She had learned long ago that silence was a weapon. She let it hang in the air until the younger council members began to shift uncomfortably in their seats. 40,000 cycles, she finally said, her voice a dry whisper that somehow filled the entire chamber. That is how long the Vaethari hegemony has ruled these stars. 40,000 cycles of expansion, of conquest, of glory. She pressed a button on her mechanical arm, and the projection platform hummed to life. A holographic map of the galaxy appeared, slowly rotating. 17 star systems glowed bright purple, marking hegemony territory. "We have defeated the Krell Dominion," Sylveth continued. "We have absorbed the Minthara Collective. We have broken the siege clans of Outer Reach. Every species that has stood against us has fallen. Every enemy has been crushed beneath our feet." Kethrul leaned forward, a thin smile on his lipless mouth. "And this is cause for warning. We are the greatest power this galaxy has ever known. What could possibly threaten us?" Sylveth turned her ancient eyes toward the young Archon. In their depths, something flickered. Something that might have been pity. "Let me tell you a story," she said. The map shifted, zooming across the galaxy to a small, unremarkable yellow star in a distant spiral arm. A tiny blue dot orbited it at a comfortable distance. The planet was beautiful in a simple way. Oceans of water, continents of green and brown, white clouds swirling across its surface. 6,000 cycles ago, Sylveth began. A scout vessel from the 3rd Expansion Fleet drifted through this region. It was damaged, low on fuel, far from home. The crew was desperate for any planet that might offer resources. She manipulated the controls, and the image changed to show the interior of an ancient Vaethari ship. The footage was grainy, degraded by time. But it was clear enough. They found this world. They scanned it. And what they found changed everything. The hologram showed the scout vessel's sensors focusing on the blue planet. Data streams appeared alongside the image. Population counts, technology levels, social structures, primitive bipeds, Sylveth said. Carbon-based, oxygen-breathing, short-lived. They called themselves many names, but the most common was human. At the time of this recording, they had just discovered how to split the atom. Admiral Ythros, commander of the hegemony's war fleets, let out a bark of laughter. Atom splitting? They were barely out of caves. "Yes," Sylveth agreed. "Barely out of caves. And do you know what they did with this new power? This gift of atomic energy that could have powered their civilization for 10,000 generations?" She pressed another button, and the hologram changed again. Fire. Nuclear fire. Mushroom clouds rising over cities. Millions of lives erased in single moments. Radiation spreading across continents. The beautiful blue world scarred with the wounds of war. They used it to kill each other, Sylveth said softly. They built weapons of mass destruction before they built power plants. They created bombs that could end all life on their world, and they pointed these bombs at their own kind. The council chamber had grown quiet. Even Kethrul's drumming fingers had stopped. The footage continued. More wars, more destruction. The humans fought over land, over resources, over ideas, over the color of their skin, over which invisible gods they worshipped. They fought with chemicals that melted flesh, with diseases engineered in laboratories, with weapons that grew more terrible with each passing generation. They poisoned their own atmosphere, Sylveth continued. They drove countless species on their world to extinction. They filled their oceans with waste. They knew they were destroying their only home, and they did it anyway. She paused, letting the horror sink in. And yet, she whispered, they survived. The footage changed to show humanity rebuilding, rising from the ashes of each war, adapting to the poisons they had created, growing stronger in the radioactive soil of their battlefields. Every catastrophe that should have ended them only made them more dangerous, Sylveth said. Every war taught them new ways to kill. Every disaster forced them to evolve faster than any species we have ever encountered. She turned to face the council directly, her dying light casting strange shadows across her ancient face. The scout vessel spent 3 cycles observing this world. The captain was a wise old warrior named Keth Voran. He had conquered 12 systems in his youth. He had never known fear, but what he saw in that blue world terrified him to his core. Sylveth pulled up one final recording. It showed the captain of the scout vessel, a strong Vathari male with battle scars covering half his face. He was recording his final log entry. I have seen many horrors in my long life. The ancient recording played. I have watched worlds burn. I have ordered the deaths of billions, but I have never encountered anything like these creatures. The captain's image flickered, distorted by time. They do not conquer through superior technology. They do not win through greater numbers. They win through something far more terrifying. They win through pure, undiluted spite. The word hung in the air like poison. I watched them fight a war where both sides knew there could be no victory. The captain continued. A war that would only end in mutual destruction. And they fought it anyway. Not because they could win, but because they refused to lose. They would rather burn their own world than let their enemies survive. The recording paused, and the ancient captain stared directly at the camera. Mark this world. Mark it and never disturb it. Do not conquer it. Do not contact it. Do not even let them know we exist. Because these creatures, these humans, they do not think like us. They do not value survival above all else. They value vengeance. They value pride. They will burn their own house down just to kill the intruder inside it. The recording ended, and silence filled the chamber. Sylveth let it stretch on for a long moment before speaking again. Captain Keth Voran returned home and presented his findings to the council of that era. They listened. They understood. They sealed the records and created the Forbidden Zone. For 6,000 cycles, we have honored this wisdom. We have left the humans alone, and they have left us alone. She turned off the holographic display, plunging the chamber into darkness. This is the centennial warning, she said. It is given once every 100 cycles so that we never forget, so that we never grow so proud that we believe we can conquer anything. There are some species that should not be disturbed, some enemies that should never be made. The humans are one of these. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Kethrul began to laugh. It was a soft sound at first, barely audible, but it grew louder and louder until it echoed off the obsidian walls like thunder. This, he said, gesturing at the empty projection platform. This is what we gather for every 100 cycles. Ancient footage of primitives playing with nuclear toys. Stories from a frightened old captain who died before most of us were born. He stood from his chair, his golden armor catching the faint light. The elders whispered of Earth's fury. He mocked, his voice dripping with contempt. And I say the elders were fools. These humans, these short-lived animals, they were dangerous 6,000 cycles ago, perhaps. But what are they now? Have they expanded beyond their single world? Have they conquered the stars? No, they are still trapped on that little blue dot, still killing each other over scraps of land. He turned to address the council, spreading his arms wide. We command fleets that can crack moons. We have weapons that can extinguish stars. We have conquered every species that dared to stand against us. And we should be afraid of creatures who cannot even achieve unity among themselves. Several of the younger council members began to nod. Sylveth watched them with growing dread. The Forbidden Zone, Kethrul continued, represents 17 potentially habitable worlds that we have ignored for 6,000 cycles. 17 worlds rich in resources. 17 worlds that could fuel our next great expansion. And we avoid them because of ghost stories told by old keepers in dark chambers. He pointed directly at Sylveth, his 4 eyes burning with ambition. I say the time for fear is over. I say we send scouts to observe these humans again. I say we determine their true capabilities with modern sensors and clear eyes. And if they are the weak, divided creatures I believe them to be, I say we add their world to our hegemony. Sylveth felt something cold settle in her ancient heart. She had seen this before. Not exactly this moment, but others like it. Young leaders who believed their power made them invincible. Ambitious rulers who thought the warnings of the past were chains to be broken rather than wisdom to be heeded. You speak of modern sensors, she said quietly. Of clear eyes. But you have not asked the most important question. Kethrul raised one eyebrow. And what question is that? 6,000 cycles have passed since Captain Kethvoran made his recording. In that time, the humans have not left their world. This is true. But ask yourself, young Archon, why not? She stepped closer to him, her mechanical frame humming with the effort. The Krell expanded into space within 2,000 cycles of discovering atomic power. The Minthara achieved interstellar travel in 3,000. Every species we have encountered followed a similar pattern. Once they learned to split the atom, the stars were theirs within a handful of millennia. Her voice dropped to a whisper. The humans learned to split the atom 6,000 cycles ago. They are still on their world. Why? Is it because they are primitive? Is it because they are weak? Or is it because they have been too busy doing something else? Kethrul's smile faltered for just a moment. 6,000 cycles. Sylveth continued. 6,000 cycles of war. Of development. Of learning new ways to destroy. While we have been conquering other species, they have been perfecting the art of killing. Every generation more efficient than the last. Every weapon more terrible than the one before. She reached out and placed one withered hand on Kethrul's golden armor. We look at them and see division. We see them fighting among themselves and think it makes them weak. But what if we are wrong? What if their constant warfare has made them the most dangerous species in the galaxy? What if the only reason they have not turned their fury outward is because they have not yet had a reason to? She pulled her hand back and turned away. I am old, she said. I will be dead within a century. I will not live to see the consequences of whatever decision this council makes, but I beg you, in the names of every elder who came before me, do not wake the sleeping monster. Do not give the humans a reason to unite. Do not give them an enemy to focus their fury upon. She began to walk toward the exit, her mechanical legs clicking against the obsidian floor. Because if you do, she said over her shoulder, you will discover what Captain Kethvaran understood all those cycles ago. These creatures do not fear death. They have danced with it so many times that it has become their closest friend, and they will drag us all into the darkness with them. Laughing as the stars go out, the doors closed behind her, and she was gone. For a long moment, the council sat in silence. The younger members exchanged uncertain glances. Even some of the more ambitious admirals seemed troubled by the old keeper's words, but Kethrul simply smiled. Superstition, he said dismissively. Nothing more than superstition dressed up as wisdom. The elders have always feared change. They have always clung to the old ways. It is time for new blood, new thinking, new conquests. He turned to Admiral Ythros. Prepare a reconnaissance fleet. I want full scans of the human system within the cycle. I want to know their numbers, their technology, their weaknesses. I want to know everything. Ythros hesitated for just a moment. And if the old keeper is right? If they are more dangerous than we believe? Kethrul's smile widened. Then we will simply have to destroy them completely. No survivors, no witnesses, no chance for revenge. The humans will join the long list of species who thought they could challenge the hegemony. Their world will be a monument to our power. He sat back in his floating chair, satisfaction radiating from every pore. Begin the preparations. A new era of expansion starts now. The council members filed out of the chamber, already discussing fleet compositions and invasion strategies. The obsidian walls watched them go, ancient and patient and filled with secrets they refused to hear. In her small room in the keeper's quarters, Sylveth knelt before a shrine that had not been used in centuries. She did not believe in gods. She had not prayed since she was a child, but tonight, she felt the need to speak to something greater than herself. "Forgive them," she whispered to the darkness. "They do not understand what they are doing. They have forgotten the old wisdom. They have grown too proud." She bowed her head, her dying light flickering in the shadows. "And forgive us for what is coming, for the silence that will claim us all." Outside her window, the stars burned cold and bright. Somewhere among them, on a small blue world in an unremarkable spiral arm, a species that had learned to love war was about to receive visitors. The elders had whispered their warnings, the young had mocked their wisdom, and fate, patient as always, had already begun to move. 300 cycles passed like water through open fingers. The elders who remembered the warning turned to dust. Their temples fell silent. Their wisdom faded into myth. The young inherited the stars, and the young had no patience for old stories. Keeper Sylveth was forgotten, her name erased from the records, her warnings dismissed as the ravings of a frightened old female who had never understood the true power of the hegemony. The centennial warning was quietly discontinued. The obsidian halls were converted into a museum, and then into a storage facility, and finally sealed entirely. High Archon Kethrul ruled for another 200 cycles before age finally claimed him, but his legacy lived on. His descendants carried his ambition in their blood. His hunger for conquest became the driving force of Vathari civilization, and the Forbidden Zone called to them like a song they could not ignore. When the reconnaissance fleet finally entered human space, it was led by a young admiral named Yithros III. He was the grandson of the original Yithros, and he had grown up on stories of the glory that awaited any commander bold enough to claim the human worlds. His fleet was small by hegemony standards, only 50 vessels, enough to observe and report, not enough to be seen as a threat. They entered the system that the humans called Sol, with their sensors at maximum range and their weapons powered down. What they found confused them. The humans had indeed left their homeworld. Colonies dotted the system like seeds scattered by a careless gardener. There were settlements on the red planet they called Mars, mining operations in the asteroid belt, research stations orbiting the giant gas planets, even a few primitive outposts in the dark cold of the outer system. But their technology was strange, inconsistent. Some of their ships were elegant and advanced, clearly the work of brilliant minds. Others were crude, barely functional, held together by nothing more than hope and stubbornness. It was as if a dozen different civilizations were trying to expand into space at the same time, each using completely different approaches. "They are not unified," Yithros observed, studying the sensor data from his command throne. "I count at least 40 different factions. They fly different flags. They use different ship designs. Some of them appear to be actively hostile to each other." His science officer, a thin female named Kethvara, nodded in agreement. "Their communications are chaos. They argue constantly. They threaten each other. They form alliances and break them within the same cycle. There is no central authority, no single leader." Yithros smiled. This was better than he had hoped. The old warnings had spoken of a species that might unite against an external threat, but how could they unite when they could not even stop fighting among themselves? "Begin detailed scans," he ordered. "I want to know everything. Their weapon capabilities, their ship speeds, their population centers. Every weakness we can exploit." For 3 full cycles, the reconnaissance fleet observed. They mapped human settlements. They analyzed human technology. They intercepted human communications and fed them through translation algorithms that struggled to make sense of the chaos. What they learned painted a picture of a species at war with itself. The humans had divided their homeworld into hundreds of territories, each claiming sovereignty. They had carried these divisions into space. There were corporate factions fighting over mining rights, religious factions arguing over the proper way to expand, political factions that seemed to hate each other more than any alien threat. Their military forces were fragmented. Each faction maintained its own fleet, its own army, its own weapons programs. They spent more resources preparing to fight each other than they did exploring the stars. "They are children," Yithros laughed when he reviewed the final reports. "Dangerous children with sharp toys, perhaps, but children nonetheless. They have no discipline, no unity. no vision beyond their petty squabbles. He composed his report to the new High Archon, a distant cousin of the original Kethrul named Vethrul the Conqueror. The message was simple and confident. The humans are ripe for harvest. Recommend full invasion force. Estimated conquest time, 1 standard cycle. Resistance, minimal. The response came within days. The hegemony was mobilizing. 12,000 warships, 30 million soldiers. The largest invasion force assembled in 500 cycles. The human worlds would be the crown jewel of a new era of expansion. Yithros was given command of the vanguard fleet. 1,000 of the hegemony's finest vessels, tasked with breaking human defenses and establishing a foothold for the main force that would follow. As his fleet prepared to jump into combat positions, Yithros allowed himself a moment of reflection. He thought of the old keeper and her warnings. He thought of the ancient footage of humans destroying themselves with nuclear fire. He thought of the terrified captain who had begged his people to leave this species alone, and he laughed. The elders whispered of Earth's fury. He said to his bridge crew, "Let us see what fury these primitives can muster against the might of the hegemony." The fleet jumped. They emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation, exactly as planned. The blue world hung before them like a jewel against the black velvet of space. Around it, human ships scrambled in obvious panic. Alarms echoed across every frequency. Emergency transmissions filled the void with desperate calls. Yithros watched with satisfaction. This was exactly what he had expected. Fear. Confusion. The primitive reaction of prey facing a predator they could not comprehend. "Begin broadcast," he ordered. Standard conquest protocol. His communication officer activated the translation systems and began transmitting on all human frequencies. "People of Earth, this is Admiral Yithros of the Vathari hegemony. Your world and all your colonies now belong to us. Resistance is futile. Your technology is inferior. Your forces are divided. Surrender immediately, and you will be allowed to serve the hegemony as a client species. Resist, and you will be destroyed." He sat back in his command throne, waiting for the panic to intensify, waiting for the humans to turn on each other as they always did, each faction trying to cut a separate deal with their new masters. Instead, something strange happened. The human communications went silent. Not just quiet, completely, utterly silent. Every frequency that had been filled with chaos moments before went dead at the same instant, as if someone had flipped a switch. Yithros frowned. What happened? Where did they go? His communication officer worked frantically at her console. "I do not understand, Admiral. They are still there. I can detect their transmitters, but they have stopped broadcasting. All of them, at the same time. Impossible. They have no unified command structure. They cannot coordinate." A new signal burst across every frequency. Not words, not pleas for mercy, not offers of surrender. Laughter. The sound filled the bridge like a physical force. Billions of human voices, laughing together. Old and young, male and female. Every faction, every nation, every colony, all of them laughing as one. Yithros felt something cold crawl up his spine. He had never heard anything like it. It was not the laughter of joy. It was not the laughter of humor. It was the laughter of a species that had been waiting for this moment. The laughter of predators who had just spotted prey. "Admiral," his sensor officer called out, voice trembling. "I am detecting massive energy signatures across the human system. They are powering up weapons. All of them. Every ship, every station, every planetary defense installation. That is impossible. Their factions were fighting each other just cycles ago. They cannot have." "Admiral." Incoming transmission. A human face appeared on the main view screen. It was a female, older, with gray hair and a face lined by years of conflict. She wore a uniform that Yithros did not recognize, covered in symbols from a dozen different human factions. When she spoke, her voice was calm, almost gentle. "Admiral Yithros, we have been waiting for you." Yithros stared at the screen. "Waiting? What do you mean?" The human smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. "Your reconnaissance fleet entered our system 3 cycles ago. We detected them the moment they arrived. We have been watching you watch us ever since. That is impossible. Our stealth technology is good. Very good. It took us almost 6 hours to find you. We spent the rest of the time studying your ships, learning your technology, Preparing, she leaned forward, and her eyes seemed to burn with an inner fire. You asked about Earth's fury. You laughed at the warnings your elders gave you. Allow me to explain something, Admiral. We humans have a saying. We call it the first rule of war. She paused, and behind her, Yithros could see other humans gathering. Soldiers, scientists, leaders of factions that had been enemies just days before. All of them standing together, all of them wearing the same terrible smile. The first rule is this: know your enemy. We have known about your hegemony for over 100 cycles. Your scouts were not as careful as they thought. We found the probes you left behind. We studied your technology. We learned your language. We read your history. Yithros felt the cold in his spine spread to his entire body. We know how you conquer. The human continued. We know you expect panic, division, surrender. We know you think our conflicts make us weak. She laughed again, and it was the most terrifying sound Yithros had ever heard. Our conflicts are how we train. Our wars are how we prepare. We have been killing each other for our entire history, Admiral. We have turned murder into an art form and destruction into a science. Every faction you observed, every army you analyzed, every weapon you scanned, they exist because we cannot stop fighting. We do not know how to stop fighting. It is what we are. She stood up straight, and behind her, weapons began to power up. Ships began to move. An entire species began to wake. You wanted to know what we would do if we faced an external threat. You wanted to see if we would unite. Allow me to show you. She raised her hand. All human forces. This is Supreme Commander Chen, speaking for the United Species Defense Initiative. 43 nations, 16 megacorporations, 9 religious orders, 400 million soldiers, 12,000 warships, all differences suspended, all conflicts paused, one enemy, one purpose. Her hand came down, fire. The void erupted in light. Yithros had never seen anything like it. Human ships poured from every direction, from behind moons and asteroids and stations that had seemed abandoned. They came in swarms, in waves, in clouds so thick that sensors could not count them all, and they were not afraid. The first wave hit the Vathari vanguard like a hammer striking glass. Human ships dove straight into the formation, ignoring all standard combat doctrine. They did not try to maintain distance. They did not try to protect themselves. They flew directly at Vathari warships and opened fire at point-blank range. They are ramming us, the sensor officer screamed. They are deliberately ramming our ships. It was true. Human vessels, some of them barely more than armed shuttles, were flying directly into Vathari cruisers. They would fire every weapon they had during the approach, then impact at full speed, their drives set to overload on contact. Are they insane? Yithros demanded. They are killing themselves. His tactical officer looked at him with wide, terrified eyes. Admiral, they are laughing. The crew of that last ship. They were laughing until the moment of impact. The battle raged for 6 hours. 6 hours of chaos and fire and death on a scale that Yithros had never imagined. The humans did not fight like any species he had studied. They did not try to win. They tried to kill. Every human ship that died took Vathari ships with it. Every human pilot who perished did so with weapons firing until the very last second. They sent volunteers on suicide missions as if life meant nothing. They programmed damaged ships to continue fighting automatically while crews evacuated. They used civilian vessels as weapons, filling cargo holds with explosives and launching them at Vathari formations. And through it all, they laughed. They sang. They screamed defiance across every frequency. Not pleas for mercy, not cries of fear, battle cries, ancient human war songs in 100 different languages, curses and promises of vengeance and statements of absolute, unwavering spite. When it was over, Yithros stared at the sensor data and felt his world crumble. He had entered human space with 1,000 ships. He had 400 left. The humans had lost more, perhaps twice as many, but they had more to lose, and they were already building replacements. Admiral, his communication officer whispered. The humans are broadcasting again. Supreme Commander Chen appeared on the screen. There was blood on her face now, burns on her hands, but she was still smiling. That was the first engagement, Admiral. The first of many. We wanted you to understand something before you report back to your hegemony. She leaned close to the camera. We do not surrender. We do not negotiate. We do not forgive. You came to our home. You threatened our children. You thought we would be easy prey." Her smile widened. "We have been waiting for an enemy worthy of our full attention. An enemy that could unite all of our factions. An enemy that we could hate together. You have given us the greatest gift imaginable, Admiral. You have given us purpose." She stepped back. "Run home, little alien. Tell your masters what you saw today. Tell them that the humans are coming. Tell them that we will not stop until every world you have ever touched is ash. Tell them that the elders were right to be afraid." She raised her hand in a gesture that Yithros would later learn was an ancient human salute. "Tell them that Earth's fury is just getting started." The transmission ended. Yithros sat in silence for a long time. His bridge crew watched him, waiting for orders, waiting for reassurance that they had not just witnessed the beginning of the end. Finally, he spoke. "Set course for home. Maximum speed." His navigation officer hesitated. "Should we not wait for the main fleet? They are only 3 days away." Yithros turned to look at him, and his eyes held the same terror that Captain Kethvoran had felt 6,000 cycles ago. "The main fleet needs to be warned. These are not primitives. These are not divided children playing with toys." He looked at the view screen, at the blue world that had cost him more ships in 6 hours than he had lost in his entire career. "These are monsters, and we just woke them up." The remnants of the Vanguard fleet fled into hyperspace, carrying word of the disaster back to the hegemony. Behind them, humanity celebrated its first victory. Not with relief, not with hope for peace, with anticipation. The war had begun. And for the first time in their entire history, every human being alive was fighting on the same side. The elders had whispered of Earth's fury. The fools had mocked their warnings. And now the fury was awake, united, and hungry for vengeance. High Archon Vethrul the Conqueror did not believe the reports. He stood in his throne room, surrounded by advisors and generals and admirals, and he listened to the survivors' account with growing anger. Admiral Yithros knelt before him, his once proud uniform torn and scorched, his 4 eyes hollow with exhaustion and fear. "You expect me to believe," the High Archon said slowly, "that primitive creatures with inferior technology destroyed 600 of our warships in a single engagement? I do not expect you to believe it, Great One," Yithros replied. "I simply tell you what happened. The humans fought like nothing we have ever encountered. They do not value their own lives. They throw themselves into death willingly, eagerly, as long as they can take enemies with them. Superstition," one of the senior admirals scoffed. "The elders spoke of such things. Nonsense to frighten children." Yithros looked up, and there was something broken in his gaze. "I watched a human pilot guide his burning ship into our flagship's engine array. His vessel was already dead. His crew was already dead. He was the only one left, and he was injured so badly that he could barely speak. But he sang as he flew into us. He sang a song about glory and death and something called Valhalla." The throne room fell silent. "I watched a human transport ship broadcast a surrender signal," Yithros continued. "Our cruiser moved to accept. When they were close enough, the humans detonated their entire cargo hold. It was filled with nuclear warheads. The transport, the cruiser, and 2 escort vessels, all gone in a single flash." He shook his head slowly. "I watched a human destroyer take damage to its life support systems. We scanned it. Every creature aboard was dead. And yet the ship continued fighting. For 2 more hours, it hunted our vessels and destroyed 3 before we finally managed to finish it. The humans had programmed their ship to continue the battle automatically. They used their last breaths to make sure we would die with them." Vethrul sat back in his throne. His clawed hands gripped the armrests until the metal creaked. "This cannot be," he said. But his voice had lost some of its certainty. "I have the sensor logs," Yithros said. "I have the recordings. View them yourself, Great One. View them and understand what we have awakened." The recordings were played for the full War Council. For 3 hours, the leaders of the Vathari hegemony watched humans die. Not reluctantly, not desperately, joyfully. They watched pilots sing as they flew suicide runs. They watched soldiers charge into certain death with smiles on their faces. They watched civilians arm themselves with anything available and throw themselves at Vathari ground troops with nothing but knives and bare hands and absolute, unwavering hatred. And they watched the humans win, not through superior technology, not through greater numbers. They won because they simply refused to lose, Because every Vathari soldier killed cost the hegemony resources and morale, while every human who died became a martyr, a hero, a reason for the survivors to fight harder. When the recordings ended, no one spoke for a long time. Finally, Admiral Kethvor, the oldest member of the War Council, cleared his throat. "The main invasion fleet," he said quietly. "What happened to them?" Yithros closed his eyes. "They entered human space 2 days after I fled. 12,000 ships, 30 million soldiers. The pride of the hegemony." He opened his eyes, and there were tears in them. "They lasted 8 days. The War Council erupted, shouts of disbelief, demands for explanation, accusations of cowardice and lies. Vethrul silenced them all with a gesture. "Explain," he commanded. Yithros took a deep breath. The humans had prepared for us. Not just militarily, strategically. They knew we were coming. They knew our tactics. They knew our psychology. He stood slowly, his injured body protesting. They did not try to defend their colonies. When our fleet approached Mars, the humans simply evacuated. They left nothing behind but booby traps and scorched earth. Every settlement had been rigged to explode. Every resource had been poisoned or destroyed. They gave us nothing. Then they retreated? They surrendered their territory? No. Yithros laughed, and it was a terrible sound. They were not retreating. They were consolidating. Every human in the outer system fell back to a single location. Earth. They turned their homeworld into a fortress. He pulled up a holographic display showing the Sol system. By the time our main fleet reached Earth, every human ship in existence was waiting. But that was not the worst part. He zoomed in on the blue planet. They had placed weapons on their moon. They had converted asteroids into kinetic bombardment platforms. They had built space stations that were nothing but guns and armor, and they had strung the space between Earth and Mars with millions of mines. He turned to face the War Council. Our fleet tried to push through. For 8 days they fought. For 8 days, they died. The humans did not give ground. They did not negotiate. They did not ask for mercy. They simply kept killing. Ship after ship, soldier after soldier, until there was nothing left. Vethrul's face had gone pale. 30 million soldiers, 12,000 ships. All of them. There were survivors. Perhaps 2,000 ships managed to escape the killing field. They fled into hyperspace, scattered across a dozen different vectors. The humans are hunting them down one by one. He pulled up another image. It showed a Vathari cruiser, damaged and listing, trying to make repairs in an empty region of space. This was the Righteous Fury. It escaped the battle 3 days ago. It was found by a human patrol yesterday. The image changed to show the aftermath. The Vathari cruiser was in pieces, but surrounding it were the wreckage of 5 human vessels. The humans lost 5 ships to destroy 1 damaged cruiser, Yithros said. They did not try to capture it. They did not try to negotiate. They simply kept attacking until it was dead. They lost 5 ships, and they will consider it a worthy trade. He turned off the display. This is what we face, Great One. An enemy that does not think like us. An enemy that does not value victory the way we do. They do not fight to win. They fight to ensure we lose. They will sacrifice any number of their own to kill us. Any number at all. The throne room was silent. The admirals and generals who had mocked Yithros moments ago now sat in stunned disbelief. The impossible had happened. The undefeated hegemony had been defeated. Vethrul stared at the empty holographic display for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was hollow. What do they want? What are their demands? Yithros shook his head. That is the problem, Great One. They have made no demands. They have not contacted us. They have not asked for reparations or territory or resources. They simply keep fighting. Then offer them peace. Offer them anything they want. We will withdraw from their space. We will pay whatever tribute they demand. We have tried. Yithros interrupted his ruler for the first time in his life. We have broadcast offers of surrender on every frequency. We have sent envoys under flags of truce. They do not respond. They do not acknowledge. They simply destroy our ships and move on to the next target. He took a step closer to the throne. Do you understand, Great One? They do not want peace. They do not want victory. They want something else entirely. What? What could they possibly want? Yithros met his ruler's eyes. They want us to understand. They want us to feel what they felt when we invaded their home. They want us to know fear and loss. and helplessness. They want us to suffer. He looked down at his burned and scarred hands. And they want us to know that it will never stop, that they will never forgive, that they will hunt us across the stars until there is nothing left but silence and ash. Vethrul stood from his throne. For the first time in his long reign, he looked old, tired, afraid. Then we will destroy them first. We will mobilize every fleet, every soldier, every weapon. We will crush them before they can spread beyond their system. It is too late for that. Every head in the throne room turned to the new voice. Standing in the doorway was a communications officer, her face pale with shock. "What did you say?" Vethrul demanded. The officer stepped forward on trembling legs. "The humans. Great One. They have already left their system. We have confirmed sightings in 3 different sectors. They are coming." The holographic display flickered back to life, showing the map of hegemony space. 3 red dots appeared at the edges, marking the location of human forces. "How?" Vethrul whispered. "Their ships were slower than ours. Their technology was inferior." "Not anymore," the officer replied. "They have captured our vessels. They are studying them, improving on them. Our scouts report that human ships are already matching our speed. Within cycles, they may exceed it." She swallowed hard. "And there is more. They are not attacking military targets first. They are hitting colonies, civilian populations. They are destroying everything. Not conquering. Destroying. They leave nothing behind." Yithros nodded slowly. "They learn fast. Faster than any species we have ever encountered. Our invasion lasted 8 days. In those 8 days, they adapted to our weapons. They developed countermeasures. They reverse-engineered our shields and found ways to penetrate them." He looked at Vethrul with something that might have been pity. 8 days, Great One. What will they become in 8 cycles? 8 generations? The High Archon sank back into his throne. His hands were shaking. "This cannot be happening. We are the Vathari hegemony. We have ruled for 40,000 cycles. We have never been defeated." Yithros finished. "No, you have never been defeated. You have never faced an enemy like this. An enemy that learns from every battle. An enemy that grows stronger with every death. An enemy that has turned spite into a weapon and vengeance into a religion." He bowed his head. "The elders tried to warn us. Captain Kethvoran tried to warn us. We laughed at them. We called them fools and cowards. We thought our power made us invincible." He looked up, and his eyes held the terrible knowledge of someone who had seen the end of all things. "We were wrong. And now we will learn the true meaning of Earth's fury." The cycles that followed were dark. The hegemony mobilized everything it had. Every ship, every soldier, every weapon that had been developed over 40,000 cycles of conquest. They threw everything at the human advance, hoping to stop it, slow it, contain it. It was not enough. The humans came like a tide, like a plague, like fire spreading through dry grass. They did not conquer systems. They burned them. Every colony they reached was destroyed. Every station was demolished. Every ship was hunted down and eliminated. And they kept learning. Vathari engineers developed a new shield frequency. Within 2 battles, the humans had cracked it. Vathari tacticians created new formations. Within 3 engagements, the humans had countered them. Vathari scientists built weapons they thought would be too terrible to use. The humans captured them and built bigger ones. It was as if every Vathari innovation only made the enemy stronger. Every secret weapon became a tool for their own destruction. But the worst part was not the military defeats. The worst part was the silence. The humans still did not respond to communications. They did not gloat. They did not make demands. They did not explain or justify or negotiate. They simply kept coming. Ship after ship, soldier after soldier. Generation after generation. Children who had been born during the first invasion grew up knowing nothing but war. They trained from the moment they could walk. They lived their entire lives aboard warships that had become cities. They died without ever knowing peace. And when they died, their children took their places. The war was no longer just a conflict. It had become their culture, their religion, their reason for existing. The Vathari had given humanity something it had never had before. A purpose that united every faction, every nation, every colony. A common enemy to hate, a shared goal that transcended all of their ancient divisions. and humanity embraced it with all the passion and fury that 6,000 cycles of internal warfare had given them. As the cycles passed and the hegemony's borders contracted, High Archon Vethrul slowly lost his grip on sanity. He became obsessed with understanding the enemy. He pored over captured human records. He studied their history. He tried to comprehend what had made them this way. What he found only deepened his despair. The humans had been forged in fire from the very beginning. Their planet had been harsh, unforgiving, filled with predators and disasters that should have killed them long before they achieved sentience. But they had survived. They had adapted. They had turned every challenge into an opportunity, and every threat into a lesson. They had fought each other because there was no one else to fight. They had developed weapons of mass destruction because they could not imagine a future without war. They had poisoned their own world because winning mattered more than surviving. And now, finally, they had an enemy worthy of their full potential. An enemy they could hate without guilt. An enemy they could destroy without reservation. An enemy that had made the first mistake no species should ever make. They had given humanity a reason to unite. In his final days, Vethrul recorded a message for any future ruler who might survive the coming storm. His voice was broken. His body was failing. His mind had seen too much horror to ever heal. "I understand now," he whispered to the recorder. "I understand what the elders knew. The humans are not monsters because of what they do. They are monsters because of what they are capable of becoming. Every atrocity they commit first against themselves. Every weapon they use, they tested on their own kind. Every strategy they employ, they refined through millennia of internal warfare." He coughed, blood speckling his lips. "We did not invade a primitive species. We invaded a species that had spent its entire existence preparing for something exactly like us. We were not their first enemy. We were their final exam. And we failed. We failed so completely that our failure will echo through the ages, as a warning to any species foolish enough to follow our path." He looked directly at the recorder, his four eyes dim with approaching death. The elders whispered of Earth's fury. "We mocked them. We thought we knew better." He smiled, and it was the smile of the damned. "We were fools. And now silence will claim us. As it should. As it must. For we awakened something that should have been left sleeping. And the universe will not forgive us for what we have done." The recording ended. 3 days later, High Archon Vethrul took his own life. The war continued without him, and humanity kept coming, patient and relentless as the tide, washing away 40,000 cycles of history one world at a time. 80 years, that was how long it took. 80 years of pursuit, 80 years of fire, 80 years of watching an empire crumble, one star system at a time. The humans did not hurry. They did not need to. Time was on their side. The Vathari population was declining with every battle, every destroyed colony, every generation that died without children. But humanity multiplied. They bred aboard their warships. They raised their young in the corridors between the stars. They built new vessels and new weapons and new soldiers faster than the Vathari could destroy them. Admiral Chen had died in the 23rd year of the war. She passed command to her daughter, who passed it to her son, who passed it to his granddaughter. The leadership changed, but the mission remained constant. Hunt them down. All of them. Leave nothing behind. The humans had learned patience from their enemy. They studied Vathari culture. They understood the importance of their great houses, their ancient bloodlines, their sacred temples, and they systematically erased each one. Every noble house that had voted for the invasion was hunted to extinction. Every temple that had blessed the war fleet was reduced to rubble. Every historical record was captured and preserved, not out of respect, but as a trophy, proof of what the humans had accomplished. By the 50th year, the hegemony had lost 12 of its 17 systems. The remaining 5 huddled together around the home system, desperately trying to build defenses that might stop the tide. It was not enough. The human fleet that arrived at the borders of Vathari Prime was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. It was not just a military force. It was a civilization on the move. Millions of ships of every size and purpose. Factories that built weapons while they traveled. Farms that grew food in the void. Schools that trained children to be soldiers before they could walk. And at the heart of it all, the original command ship from Earth. Modified, expanded, armored with the plundered technology of a dozen species the humans had encountered along the way. It was commanded by a woman named Chen, just as it had been for 4 generations. This Chen was old now. Her hair was white. Her face was weathered by decades of war. She had been born aboard this ship, had spent her entire life fighting, and she intended to die here, in this final battle. If there was going to be a final battle, she studied the holographic display showing the Vathari defenses. They had built everything they had left into a single defensive line. Thousands of ships, hundreds of orbital stations, planetary shields that covered entire worlds. It was the most formidable defensive position humanity had ever faced. They are desperate, her tactical officer observed. They have put everything into this. If we break through, there is nothing left. They know this is the end. Chen agreed. One way or another. She turned to her communication officer. Are they broadcasting? Yes, Admiral. Standard frequencies. They are requesting negotiations. Chen smiled. It was the same smile her great-grandmother had worn 80 years ago. The smile of a predator. After all this time, they still think we might negotiate. She stood from her command chair and walked to the main view screen. The Vathari homeworld hung in the distance, barely visible through the defensive installations that surrounded it. My great-grandmother was on Earth when they came, she said quietly. She was a child, 10 years old. She watched their ships darken the sky. She heard their demands for surrender. She saw the fear in her parents' eyes. She turned to face her bridge crew. Many of them were young, 3rd or 4th generation soldiers who had never known peace, who had never wanted peace. She told my grandmother a story before she died. She said that when the invasion began, when humanity first realized what they faced, something changed. For the first time in their entire history, every human being on Earth felt the same thing at the same time. Not fear, not anger, something deeper. She paused, remembering the words that had been passed down through her family. Relief. They felt relief. Because finally, at long last, they had found an enemy worthy of their full attention. An enemy that could unite them. An enemy that gave meaning to all the death and destruction they had inflicted on each other for thousands of years. She turned back to the view screen. The Vathari made us into what we are. They gave us purpose. They turned our endless internal wars into preparation for the greatest conflict our species has ever known. And now, 80 years later, we stand at the gates of their homeworld. Her voice hardened. We owe them a debt of gratitude for making us strong, a debt of blood for making us monsters, and we are going to pay that debt in full. She raised her hand. All ships, prepare to attack. No negotiation, no mercy, no survivors. The battle for Vathari Prime lasted 3 days. It was the largest military engagement in the history of both species. Millions of soldiers on both sides. Thousands of ships turning the void into a hellscape of fire and debris. Weapons that cracked moons and shattered space stations and burned through shields like paper. The humans lost more ships in those 3 days than they had lost in the previous 8 decades combined. But they kept coming. Wave after wave. Generation after generation of soldiers throwing themselves into the fire, singing their ancient war songs, laughing in the face of death. On the 2nd day, the Vathari defensive line broke. Human ships poured through the gap like water through a crumbling dam. They spread across the system, overwhelming the remaining defenses, crushing everything in their path. By the 3rd day, only the homeworld remained. Admiral Chen ordered her ship to take position directly above the planet's capital city. Below her, she could see the ancient spires of the Vathari government, the temples where their elders had once whispered their warnings, the throne room where a dozen high archons had plotted their conquests. All of it about to end. A transmission request appeared on her console. The last archon, a young male barely old enough to rule, begging for an audience. Chen considered ignoring it. They had ignored every other communication for 80 years. But something made her hesitate. After all this time, all this blood, all this death, she found that she wanted them to understand. Accept the transmission, she ordered. The young archon appeared on screen. He was trembling. His ceremonial robes were torn. Behind him, Chen could see fires burning, walls crumbling, the ruins of a civilization that had stood for 40,000 years. Please, he whispered. Please, we surrender. We have surrendered for 80 years. We have offered everything. Our territory, our technology, our wealth, our lives. What more do you want? Why will you not stop? Chen studied him for a long moment. He was so young, Probably born after the war began. He had never known peace either. In that way, they were the same. 80 years ago, she said slowly. Your ancestors came to our home. They looked at us and saw primitives, animals, creatures to be conquered and enslaved. They did not ask if we wanted to join their hegemony. They did not offer trade or diplomacy. They simply demanded our surrender. And when we refused, they tried to destroy us. The young Archon bowed his head. We know. We know what was done. It was wrong. It was arrogance. It was a mistake. Chen interrupted. A terrible mistake. Not because it was cruel. Not because it was unjust. It was a mistake because you did not understand what you were dealing with. She leaned forward. Your elders understood. They warned you. They begged you to leave us alone. They knew what we were. They knew what we would become if you gave us a reason to unite. She gestured at the devastation visible through the viewport. This is what we become. This is what we are. You wanted our fury, Archon. You laughed at the warnings. You came to our home and killed our children. And now you want us to stop? You want mercy? Forgiveness? She shook her head slowly. We do not want your surrender. We have never wanted your surrender. We do not want your territory or your technology or your wealth. We want something much simpler. The young Archon looked up, desperate hope in his eyes. What? Name it. Anything. We will give you anything. Chen smiled, and it was the saddest smile she had ever worn. We want you to understand. Before the end, we want you to understand what you did to us. You did not just attack our world. You did not just kill our people. You turned us into monsters. You took a species that might have eventually learned peace, and you forged us into weapons. You gave us a purpose that consumed everything else. She stood, her old bones aching with the effort. Look at us, Archon. Look at what we have become. We have spent 80 years hunting you. 80 years of nothing but war. Our children are born on warships. Our culture is built around destruction. We do not know how to be anything else anymore. We cannot stop. We have forgotten how. Tears appeared in her eyes. Real tears. Perhaps the first she had shed in decades. You made us into this, and we hate you for it. But we also hate ourselves, because somewhere inside, we know the truth. We know that we were already monsters. We were already broken. You just gave us permission to stop pretending otherwise. She turned away from the screen. So no, Archon. We will not stop. We will not forgive. We will not offer mercy. Because, if we did, we would have to face what we have become. We would have to live with the knowledge of what we are. She looked back over her shoulder. It is easier to keep killing. Easier to keep hating. Easier to be monsters than to be human beings who have done monstrous things. She raised her hand. You wanted to understand why we will not stop. That is your answer. We cannot stop. We have lost the ability. We are broken in ways that cannot be repaired. And you broke us. Her hand came down. Begin bombardment. The young Archon screamed something. A plea. A prayer. A curse. Chen did not hear it. The transmission had already ended. Below her, the ancient capital of the Vathari hegemony began to burn. The bombardment lasted 4 hours. The humans did not use clean weapons. They used fire. They used radiation. They used every terrible thing they had developed over 80 years of war. When they were finished, the capital city was a crater, a wound in the planet's surface that would take millennia to heal. But they were not done. Chen ordered her ships to spread across the planet, to find every population center, every settlement, every hiding place. The hunt had to be complete. The example had to be absolute. It took 3 more days to finish. 3 days of systematic destruction. 3 days of erasing 40,000 years of civilization from existence. When it was over, Vathari Prime was silent, a dead world orbiting a dying star. Chen stood on the observation deck of her ship, watching the smoke rise from the planet below. Her officers surrounded her, waiting for orders, waiting to be told what came next. It is finished, her tactical officer said quietly. The hegemony is destroyed. There are scattered survivors in the outer reaches of their territory, but they pose no threat. We have won. Chen did not respond. She continued staring at the dead world. Admiral? The tactical officer stepped closer. What are your orders? Do we hunt down the survivors? Do we return home? Home, Chen repeated. The word sounded strange in her mouth. Foreign. We do not have a home. Not anymore. Home is where the war is. Home is the next battle, the next enemy, the next civilization foolish enough to stand in our way. She turned to face her officers. They were so young, born aboard ships, raised to fight. They had never known anything else. What are we going to do now? She asked. We have spent 4 generations hunting this enemy. Our entire society is built around this war. What happens when there is no war left to fight? No one answered. No one knew how. Chen nodded slowly. She had expected as much. Build a monument, she ordered. I want something that will last until the stars burn out. Something that will show the galaxy what happens when you threaten humanity. A warning to any species that might be watching. She looked back at the dead planet. And then we wait. We patrol. We watch. Because there will be other enemies. Other threats. Other fools who did not learn from the Vathari's mistake. Her voice hardened. We are humanity. We are the children of Earth. We have turned ourselves into weapons, and weapons need enemies. If none come to us, we will find them. If none threaten us, we will find other reasons to fight. She closed her eyes. That is what we are now. That is what they made us. And that is what we will remain until the universe grows dark and cold and empty. She opened her eyes. Now go. Build my monument. Write our warning. Let the galaxy know what the elders always understood. She turned and walked away, disappearing into the depths of her ship. Behind her, her officers began their work. A monument was designed. Resources were gathered. A structure began to take shape, built from the fused wreckage of both human and Vathari ships. A memorial to the war that had changed humanity forever. And in her quarters, Admiral Chen sat alone in the darkness, surrounded by the sounds of victory, and tried to remember what peace had felt like. She could not. She had been born during the war. Her mother had been born during the war. Her grandmother had been a child when it started. 4 generations of her family had known nothing but conflict, and now it was over. She should have felt relief, joy, satisfaction. Instead, she felt empty, hollow, as if the purpose that had driven her entire life had suddenly vanished, leaving nothing behind but a shell that no longer knew how to exist. We won, she whispered to the darkness. We destroyed them. We avenged our ancestors. We proved that humanity cannot be conquered. The words sounded hollow. So why do I feel like we lost something along the way? No answer came. Outside her window, the dead world continued its silent orbit, and the monument grew larger with each passing hour. A testament to humanity's fury, a warning to the galaxy, and a grave marker for everything the human race used to be. 1,000 years passed. The galaxy continued its slow rotation. Stars were born and died. Civilizations rose and fell. The memory of the Vathari hegemony faded into legend, and then into myth, and then into stories told to frighten children. But the dead expanse remained. 17 star systems, stretching across a vast region of space, where no life existed, no colonies, no stations, no signals, nothing but cold, silent worlds circling dying stars. The collective research vessel seeking light drifted through this void, its sensors scanning, its crew cataloging the emptiness. The collective was a young civilization, barely 5,000 cycles old. They had spread across 100 worlds on the far side of the galaxy, never knowing about the ancient war that had scarred this region of space. Until now, Captain Irenvo stood on the bridge of the Seeking Light, watching the data streams scroll across her display. Her species, the Venkai, had evolved on a water world, and she still found the vast emptiness of space unsettling. But this was different. This emptiness felt wrong, heavy, as if the void itself was holding its breath. Captain, her science officer called out, I am detecting debris fields throughout this system. Massive amounts of processed metal, ship hulls, station components. This region was inhabited once. How long ago? Irenvo asked. Based on decay patterns, approximately 1,000 cycles. Maybe more. 1,000 cycles. That was a long time, but not unthinkable. Civilizations fell. Species died out. It was the nature of things. But as the Seeking Light pushed deeper into the dead expanse, the scale of the destruction became impossible to ignore. Planet after planet showed signs of bombardment. Cities reduced to craters. Oceans boiled away. Atmospheres stripped clean. Whatever had happened here, it had not been an accident or a natural disaster. It had been deliberate, systematic, total. This was genocide, Urenvo whispered. An entire civilization erased. Multiple civilizations, her science officer corrected. I am detecting debris from at least 3 different technological signatures. 4. No. 5. Captain, there were 5 different species living in these systems. All of them are gone. 5 species. Hundreds of worlds. Billions of lives. All silent now. The Seeking Light continued its survey, cataloging the destruction, mapping the debris fields, piecing together the story of what had happened. And slowly, a picture began to emerge. One species had been the dominant power. Their technology was most common in the debris. Their cities were the largest ruins. They had ruled this region for a very long time, but someone had destroyed them. Someone had hunted them down system by system, world by world, until nothing remained. Someone with terrifying efficiency and absolute commitment. Captain, the navigation officer's voice was strained. I am detecting an artificial structure ahead. It is massive, moon-sized, and it is transmitting a signal. Urenvo felt a chill run through her gills. What kind of signal? A beacon. On multiple frequencies. It appears to be designed to attract attention. She considered her options. Every instinct told her to turn back, to flee this dead region and never return. But she was a scientist, a seeker of knowledge, and something in the darkness was calling to her. Take us closer, she ordered. Slowly, shields at maximum, the structure came into view gradually, emerging from the darkness like a mountain rising from a sea of stars. It was built from the wreckage of ships, thousands of ships, millions of pieces welded and fused together into a single monument of impossible scale. At its center, a spire rose toward the heavens, tipped with a light that pulsed slowly, steadily, like a heartbeat. It is beautiful, someone whispered. It is horrifying, Urenvo corrected. Those are graves. This entire structure is made of corpses. The beacon's signal resolved into something more complex. Text, images, a message repeated in 100 different languages, most of them dead. Can you translate it? Urenvo asked. Her communication officer worked at her console, feeding the signal through translation algorithms. It is taking some time. The dominant language is one I have never encountered, but there are reference markers, linguistic bridges. I can construct a rough translation. She paused, her face growing pale. Captain, I have it. The message is the same in every language. It reads as follows. She took a deep breath. Here stood the Vathari hegemony. They numbered in the trillions. They ruled for 40,000 years. They came to Earth seeking conquest. This is what remains. The bridge fell silent. There is more, the communication officer continued. A second message in a different style. More recent additions in other languages, apparently added over time as new species encountered the monument. She scrolled through the translations. Warning, from the Krelvath Confederacy. We came seeking resources. We found only death. Turn back. Warning from the singing people of vast sky. They are still watching. They never stopped watching. Run. Warning from the third expansion of the Hollow Ones. We thought we could negotiate. We were wrong. This region belongs to them. Forever. Warning from... She stopped, her voice catching. Captain, there are hundreds of these. Hundreds of species have added their warnings over the past 1,000 cycles. Some of them we know. Some of them are extinct now. All of them say the same thing. Urenvo stared at the monument. What does the final message say? The one at the base of the structure. Her communication officer scrolled to the original inscription. It is in the language of the builders, the ones who destroyed the hegemony. It reads, The elders whispered of Earth's fury. Their children mocked fate. Ask them how that worked out. We'll wait. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Earth, Urenvo repeated. That was their home world? Based on the records I can piece together? Yes. A small planet in an unremarkable system. The hegemony invaded it roughly 1,100 cycles ago. They expected easy conquest. What they received was... She gestured at the monument. This. One planet. The tactical officer stepped forward, disbelief in his voice. One planet destroyed the hegemony. They ruled 17 systems. They had been a power for 40,000 cycles. How could one primitive world? They were not primitive when the war ended, the communication officer interrupted. The records suggest that the humans adapted, evolved. They reverse-engineered hegemony technology and improved upon it. By the end, their ships were faster and more powerful than anything the hegemony could build. She pulled up additional data. The war lasted approximately 80 cycles. In that time, the humans went from defending their home system to hunting the hegemony across 17 star systems. They destroyed everything, not just military targets. Everything, every colony, every station, every population center. They left nothing behind but ruins and warnings. Yirenvo felt the chill deepen. And what happened to them? The humans? After they won? Unknown. The records end approximately 1,000 cycles ago. The last confirmed sighting was here, at this monument. After that, nothing. They either died out, withdrew to their home system, or what? The communication officer looked at her with haunted eyes. Or they are still out there, watching, waiting, making sure no one ever threatens them again. The bridge crew exchanged nervous glances. The monument loomed before them, silent and patient. 1,000 years of warnings carved into its surface. 1,000 years of species who had come too close and paid the price. Captain, the sensor officer spoke up. I am detecting something. At the edge of our range. A ship. No, multiple ships. They just appeared. Yirenvo's blood ran cold. Where? Behind us. Between us and the edge of the dead expanse. They are not Venkai. They are not any design I recognize. The communication officer's console lit up. Incoming transmission, audio only. Let me hear it. For a moment, there was only static. Then a voice. Soft, calm, almost friendly. Research vessel seeking light. This is the human patrol ship. Eternal vigilance. You have entered restricted space. Please state your intentions. Human. The word echoed through the bridge. The builders of the monument. The destroyers of the hegemony. They were not extinct. They were not gone. They were right behind them. Yirenvo forced herself to remain calm. She was a diplomat as well as a scientist. She had negotiated with hostile species before. She could do this. Eternal vigilance. This is Captain Yirenvo of the collective research vessel Seeking Light. We are a scientific expedition from the Venkai people. We meant no intrusion. We were simply studying the debris in this region. A long pause. Then the voice returned. We know who you are, Captain. We have been watching you since you entered the expanse. Your technology, your communication protocols, your biological signatures. We know everything about your species. Yirenvo felt her gills flutter with fear. We mean you no harm. We did not know this region was claimed. We will leave immediately. Yes, you will. Another pause. But first we need you to understand something. Can you see the monument, Captain? Yes. Do you know what it represents? The destruction of the Vathari hegemony. Correct. And do you know why we built it? Yirenvo hesitated. To commemorate your victory? The voice laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. No, Captain. We built it as a warning. Not to honor what we did, but to prevent us from having to do it again. Every species that has encountered that monument has a choice. They can learn from the hegemony's mistake, or they can repeat it. The voice hardened. 1,000 years ago. We were a primitive species on a single world. We knew nothing of the galaxy. We had no quarrel with anyone beyond our own atmosphere. And then the hegemony came. They threatened our children. They tried to conquer our home. They made us into monsters. A pause. We do not want to be monsters, Captain. We never did. But we learned something during our war with the hegemony. We learned that we are very, very good at it. We learned that when we have a reason to fight, nothing in this galaxy can stop us. Nothing. Yirenvo understood now. The monument was not a trophy. It was a gravestone. A reminder of what humanity had become, and a warning of what they would become again if threatened. We understand, she said quietly. We will leave. We will tell our people about this place. About you. We will make sure they know to leave you alone. Good. The voice softened slightly. We do not want war, Captain. We have had enough war to last us until the stars burn out. But we are always ready for it. We are always watching. And we never forget. A final pause. Go home, Captain Yirenvo. Tell your people what you saw here. Tell them about the hegemony. Tell them about the monument. Tell them about us. And tell them that if they are wise, they will never give us a reason to visit them. The transmission ended. On the sensor display, the human ships began to move, not toward the seeking light. Away. Back into the darkness. Back to wherever they had come from. They are letting us go. The tactical officer breathed. Why? Irenvo watched the human ships disappear into the void. Because we are not a threat. Because we came in peace. And we will leave in peace. Because they do not want to be monsters. She turned to her navigation officer. Set course for home. Maximum speed. As the seeking light fled the dead expanse, Irenvo composed her report. She described the monument, the warnings, the human ships that had appeared from nowhere and vanished just as quickly. She described a species that had spent 1,000 years watching, waiting, preparing for a war they hoped would never come, and she described her own feelings. The terror she had felt when she realized they were being watched, the relief when they were allowed to leave, the strange sadness in the human voice. Speaking of a war that had transformed them into something they never wanted to be. They are not conquerors, she wrote. They are not expansionists. They are survivors. Wounded survivors of a war that cost them everything, including their own innocence. They do not want to fight. They want to be left alone. They want the galaxy to forget they exist. She paused, choosing her next words carefully. But they are ready to fight. They are always ready. They have built their entire civilization around the possibility that one day, another species will make the same mistake the hegemony made, and if that day comes, they will respond the same way. With total, absolute, pitiless destruction. She saved the report and sent it to the collective archives. A warning for future generations. Another voice added to the 1,000-year chorus of species who had encountered the monument and lived to tell the tale. In the cycles that followed, the story spread. The dead expanse became a legend. Humanity became a myth. Captains whispered their warnings in starport bars. Diplomats spoke of them in hushed tones during negotiations. Children learned about them in schools, alongside lessons about black holes and supernovas and other cosmic dangers. And somewhere in the darkness between stars, humanity continued its vigil, watching, waiting, hoping that the lesson would finally be learned. The elders had whispered their warnings. Their children had mocked fate, and silence had claimed them all. But the silence was not empty. The silence was patient. The silence had eyes and ears and weapons that could crack worlds. The silence remembered every threat, every insult, every species that had thought itself superior. And the silence was waiting, waiting for someone to be foolish enough to wake it again. Some said humanity had transcended, that they had evolved beyond physical form, and now existed as pure energy, drifting between the stars like gods. Some said they had returned to Earth, that they had rebuilt their ancient world and sealed themselves away, content to live out their existence in isolation. Some said they were everywhere, that every shadow concealed human eyes, that every star was watched by human ships, that the entire galaxy was their territory now, claimed by silence and enforced by the memory of what they had done. The truth, as always, was simpler and more terrible. Humanity was still human, still mortal, still flawed. They lived, they loved, they died. They were replaced by new generations. But they had learned something that most species never did. They had learned that the universe does not care about justice. It does not care about fairness. It does not protect the innocent or punish the guilty. The only thing the universe respects is power, the willingness to use it, the commitment to win at any cost. And humanity had proven, beyond any doubt, that they possessed that willingness, that commitment, that terrifying, absolute refusal to ever lose. So they waited, and they watched, and they hoped that the warnings would be enough, but they kept their weapons ready, just in case, because somewhere out there, in the vast darkness between stars, there was always another species rising to power, another civilization looking at the galaxy and seeing only resources to be claimed, another empire that would look at the warnings and laugh, just as the hegemony had laughed. And when that day came, humanity would be ready. They had all the time in the universe, and they had learned, long ago, to be very, very patient. The monument orbited in silence, its beacon pulsing steadily into the void, 1,000 years of warnings carved into its surface. 1,000 years of silence kept by the species that had built it. At its base, the original inscription remained, simple words in a simple language, a message for anyone foolish enough to ignore all the other warnings. The elders whispered of Earth's fury. Their children mocked fate, asked them how that worked out. And below that, added by human hands that had never known peace. We'll wait. They always did, and they always would, until the last star burned out and the universe finally, mercifully, fell silent forever. Only then would humanity rest. Only then would the fury finally fade. Only then would the monument mean nothing more than what it appeared to be. A grave, a memory, a warning that no longer needed to be heeded, because in the end, everything becomes silence, even fury, even humanity, even the stars themselves. But until that distant day, the silence watched, and waited, and remembered, always remembered.